Thank you for joining me this evening as we are launching a new huddle entitled Man to Man. It is a huddle designed for men to engage in honest dialogue about issues that we face and obstacles that we have to find ways to overcome in our everyday life. You know, we sit in the barber shops and have conversations, and we have conversations on the golf course and basketball course, but so often very few of those conversations get to some of the root issues that we're dealing with and baggage we're often carrying as men. And so that's what this huddle is all about. And so I invite you to join me every first Monday of the month. We're going to have candid, uncut, no chase conversation. And tonight, I'm blessed to have with me to help me kick it off George Knox and Malty Moore. George, would you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Thank you, and thank you. It's really a privilege to find a safe place where we can talk about things that we've been carrying sometimes for a long time, because we'll find out that it's very easy to cope with things when you have an opportunity to share them. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I went to New Stanton Senior High School, for those of you who are over 80 years old. After I graduated from high school, I went to Michigan State University. I spent 6 years there, and then I served 5 years, 10 months, and 12 days in the United States Army before I moved back to Jacksonville and eventually to Miami. While I was in Miami, I applied for law school, was admitted to the University of Miami Law School, and I graduated from the law school in 1973. I spent the next 40 years practicing law in Miami, and then I was blessed to find Port St. Lucie about 7 years ago. So I've been a retired resident of Port St. Lucie for the last 7 years, and I'm still active in doing things wherever it is that I might be able to render some service, especially related to helping others to travel the path that I've been blessed to travel thus far.
George and I met on the golf course, and we quickly became good friends. He's a wonderful guy with a big heart. Malty, man, introduce yourself to our audience.
I'm a Malty Moore, and I'm from a small town in Central Florida, Brooksville, Florida, of Hernando County. My world in Brooksville was centered around migrant farm work, and I graduated high school in 1964. Took the, traveling all around the country and Maryland, New York, and different places working. Then when I was 20, Bethune-Cookman College, they offered me a full football scholarship. So I went there with the idea of earning a BS degree and becoming a football coach and come back home to Brooksville. But while I was there, I ended up making All-America, and I signed a contract with the Miami Dolphins. And as God blessed me, I was enrolled on the team during Super Bowl VI, Super Bowl VII, Super Bowl VIII. Now, we went undefeated. We lost Super Bowl VI and went undefeated in Super Bowl VII and went back-to-back in Super Bowl VIII. Then, after I retired in 1976, I worked for 37 years in the Broward County school system. So, and I was looking for a church, and Pastor Shazier used to coach football with a guy named Stevie, and I so happened I was in school with a guy named Ep Davis, who was Stevie's father, and I ended up here in Port St. Lucie, Florida.
Yeah, I remember getting that call from Mr. Davis. Steve and I are best friends. He said, I got a buddy moving to Port St. Lucie. and he's going to need a church home. I say, give me his number. I know a real good church he can attend. Thank both of you for joining me tonight. For those who are viewing, we're going to have these candid conversations every month. We're going to begin with a book that I started reading some months ago, and it gripped me, it touched me in areas that I had buried. I advise you to purchase the book and read through it with us and take a journey. It's a book written by Patrick Means, and the title of the book is Men's Secret Wars. Men's Secret Wars. And so our goal and objective in this huddle, this man's huddle, is to have just real, honest conversations about men issues. Here's something that Means says that is so true. He says, many men are fighting secret wars against workaholism, sex addiction, substance abuse, pornography, and extramarital affairs. Most are reluctant to seek help, but men don't have to struggle alone and become casualties. I believe that's so true, and tonight we're going to look at and have some dialogue around chapter 1, because chapter 1 really just, like I say, gripped me. I love to hear what thoughts and emotions the two of you experienced as you read chapter 1. Chapter 1, he really talks about the weight that you carry as a man, and it's really multidimensional, because we not only just carry weight as a man, but there is weight we carry as a father. There's a weight that we carry as a husband. There's a weight we carry as leaders. He talks about and putting the emphasis on just the weight and the pressure and the expectations that society places on us, and we seek and we struggle often to live up to those expectations. And when we don't, sometimes it has a negative impact on us. When we don't, sometimes society views us in a negative way. And, you know, for a man who does not measure up to what society may have for him expectation-wise as a man, as a husband, if he doesn't have everything perfect, doesn't do everything right, if he messes up, if he stumbles, they call you a bum. They use a lot of derogatory terms to describe you, but it is a heavy weight that society places on you. And I don't know how I grip y'all, but as I began to read it and I walked through the corridors of my life, that weight I felt at a young age. I felt that weight in high school. I was sharing with George in a conversation earlier. I say when I began to read chapter 1, I returned back to the football office my senior year in high school when I was watching film with a scout. And as we're watching film, there's a voice in my head asking me, when are you going to tell him? When are you going to tell him? And I was reluctant, but I said to him, I said, Coach, I'm not going to college and play football. And he stopped the film. He said, what do you mean? I say, my mother's raising 4 kids. She's struggling in the projects. I'm going to the military. And his response to me was, son, 2 weeks after you go to the military, you're going to wish you'd have came and played football. Well, it was the weight and the pressure that I felt was on me to step up and be a man and do whatever I could to provide. And that weight, again, weighs on us in so many different areas. Society has its model, its picture, its description for us as a man, as a father, a husband, and when we don't meet it, Often we have to deal with that internally, and there's so many ways, you know. What was your initial reaction and thoughts about chapter 1, and we talked about the weight that society places on us as men, as husbands, and the expectations, George?
Well, what struck me most was the idea that you talked about earlier, that is root causes. Because if we go back in our lives and go back in our childhood, often we can think of one incident that started to operate as an obstacle to our growth and development. The book, you know, in interviewing people, Mr. Means would talk to people about telling their story. And when I go back to my childhood about the things that started to introduce me to doubt and insecurity, it had to do with expectation. I was an only child, mama's boy, and my mother was in the school system, and so she was considered in that day to be in a position to provide for me. The fact is that coming from a broken home, it's still hard for a single parent to raise even one child. And there were high expectations because I was the little golden boy. I was the apple of my mother's eye, and I was kind of smart, and there was an expectation that I would excel in school, for example. One of the disadvantages of being smart at a very early age is that I started elementary school at 6 years old, but in the 3rd grade. And so for the rest of my whole career, I was less mature, I was smaller, I wasn't as tough as my peers, and so I had to find a way to defend myself. But the thing that struck me, the thing that made me feel worse about myself was in 3rd grade, trying to compete. First test was given by my 3rd grade teacher was a handwriting test. The word was orange, and we had to write orange in longhand. And I messed the O up. I didn't have a loop at the top of the O, and I erased it. The pencil eraser was dirty, and it left a dirty mark on my paper. And that paper came back, and the teacher had written, "Very good, not neat." And that was 72 years ago. And I feel crushed today when I think about that, because the error I blame myself for. And the fact is, I was less than perfect, to the point that my teacher and role model had pointed it out. So it's just like somebody calling you stupid, or somebody that you respect putting you down. That level of humiliation, I would say, had a lot to do with contributing to my lack of confidence as I move forward in life. And so the thing that struck me most, again, about the first chapter of the book is it makes you go back, and it makes you realize and identify things. And what I learned over the years when I'm able to do that is about recalling rather than reliving. And so I can now speak more objectively about a terrible experience that affected my life when I keep myself here and understand that I'm not going through it again, I'm just describing it, or recalling it. And the reason that I would encourage this kind of pursuit is that one of the secrets is the conversations that we have with ourselves and how we treat ourselves in those conversations.
And so many of our conversations, our internal dialogue, has been shaped by what Williams talks about, the hero subculture, that the culture has planted this idea in our thinking that we're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be a hero. And a lot of times, so often, we do it not understanding what we've really done. We put on this cape. We, we take on this Superman syndrome, but the reality is we're not Superman. We may, we may be big in stature, tall in stature, but we're not perfect. But society puts so much pressure on you. What, Marty, what gripped you as he talked about the expectations and this Superman, culture that we live in, where they expect us to be perfect fathers, perfect men and husbands, and being able to solve all of the issues, and just carrying that weight.
To be honest, I didn't feel a lot of pressure early in my life because everybody in my hometown was basically poor, and so we would just work. But when I went to Bethune, I was 6'5" and about 265, and they immediately talked about me about going to the pros. And there was no one from my hometown who had ever went to the pros. And so it was, say, you're going to have to be bench pressing 400 to 500 pounds. You got to run at 40 and 49, and you got to learn how to pass rush. But I love Bethune, but we didn't have the coaches to teach all the techniques that I should have been taught. And so then all of a sudden I felt a lot of pressure where I had to make this tackle. I had to make this block. I had to do all this. And be honest, I was wondering why, because I felt I can go to Bethune and get me a degree and come back home and coach football, not go to the NFL, because no one in my hometown had ever did this. Then after I got into the pros in 1971, we lost the Super Bowl to Dallas, and the next year we went undefeated. And all of a sudden I made a little bit of money, but the money was nowhere near what it is today. So all of a sudden the pressure was on me to give back. So I haven't bought me a new car yet. So all that pressure was on, and everybody expected. I go to a little meeting with the softball team, so they expected me to buy all the uniforms. I come to a meeting, so they expected me to do this, and actually I moved back to my hometown in 2012 because I really wanted to give back, but that expectation had grown, and I really just moved back down here because there's no way I could have kept up what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to be in this church. They wanted me to be a part of this football league, and they expect me to bring money. And so that was first time I really felt, at Bethune I felt it, but I really felt it then. And that part of the book, they said that, it's hard to say no. And it was hard for me to say no because, I had more money than the average one of my homeboys, but I didn't have the kind of money that they have today. And so
you didn't have enough to take care of the whole town.
No, that was but the pressure. But I learned something that if you got to paint a house, don't look at the whole house. Paint the front today, paint the west side next day, and go on. And then within a week or two, just paint it.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the pile seems to get bigger and heavier. You say, okay, you get to Bethune-Cookman, and you're thinking about getting a degree and, going to coach football,
yes,
but they've already placed expectations on you. When they see your size, you walk in there, okay, this is a big guy. They've already put the expectations on you to make it to the professional league, play pro football. Then it just keeps adding on. Then you have a little success, and then, family members, people back home, they have more expectations, of you, and it just keeps going and going, and then you got to go to work every day, and the workplace has expectations, and we're dealing with, the truth is, we're dealing with weight that has been applied on us from a multitude of areas simultaneously, and to maintain my sanity, I feel like we just suppress it in our subconscious and we keep marching on like forward like soldiers. We keep pressing on with a Superman mentality, yet on the inside, we are often being torn, and we often have a lot of hurt that we're dealing with and undealt issues, and the power doesn't get, it just keeps going. I know it surprises people. You know, I'm a speech coach, and you know, when I'm working with a client, they always express how nervous they are, and they're always shocked when I tell them I've been speaking over 20 years, and every time I speak, whether it's preaching in a pulpit or giving a keynote speech in the secular arena, I'm always nervous. And they're like, "You're nervous?" Yes, I'm nervous because I know when I stand to speak, whether it's a religious setting or a secular setting, there's the weight and the pressure of the expectations, you know, and you start thinking about all the different areas. There's the expectations of what type of father we should be, and we want to meet those expectations. There's the expectation of a husband. I mean, that was one of the heaviest weights that I struggled with, the expectation of being a good husband, because my mother and father got divorced when I was in middle school, and even when my mother and father was together, I did not grow up in a home where my father modeled, you know, affectionate behavior towards a woman, and I found myself getting my definition of manhood from the basketball court, from the football team, from the Navy, from the docks. I would go and work with the longshoremen on the weekend, and then you're an adult and you get into a serious relationship, and you discover that your definition that the society has shaped and given you is a faulty one. And my wife's nickname was Miss Why Don't You? She was like, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And that weight was so, I think that is one of the heaviest weights that I've dealt with as a male, the weight to be a good husband when I did not have a model or a picture. I mean, it literally made me feel less than a man, made me feel like that something was wrong with me. It made me, at nights, 3 in the morning, go and sit in another room by myself and ask myself the questions, why don't I do these things? And it may sound, you know, funny or small to many people, but my wife would just ask me simple things like, well, why don't you ask me how my day is when you come home? Why don't you give me a kiss? Why don't you do? And my you know, quick, short response would be, that's not me, girl. Don't try to make me be like somebody else. That's not me. But at some point, I started to wonder, why don't I do these things? I've never seen it. But yet, there is the expectation that we have to deal with. And most of us, I mean, you already shared, your mother raised you, my mother raised 4, your mother.
Mother only.
Only mother. So no male father model in the house for us to see every day how a man is supposed to behave and how a man is supposed to treat a woman. And so we all want to be a man, and so we will seek out that knowledge from somewhere. And for me, and I'm pretty sure the same is true for you guys, I got it from the guys on the football team. I got it from the military. But all of those guys came from backgrounds similar to me. No man. And so we end up with the definition of manhood being profit and pleasure, how much money you can make and how many women you can sleep with, and then you get in a serious relationship, you get married, and that definition is not sufficient to sustain a healthy marriage. What has been, what area of your life, societal expectations has given you the greatest obstacle for you? For me, it was the husband part.
Well, for me, it was the tough part. I played in the band, for example. I mean, I played in a really good band. So I didn't, the band boys were not seen to be as tough as the football players or the athletes. But we had to learn how to hold our own, for example. And I'll twist it a little bit, because one of the things that none of us has talked about is the fact that the other part of being a black man is to deal with a world that is indifferent towards black men in many respects. And so as Malty was talking, for example, and we were talking about the things that apply pressure to you. I graduated from high school 16. Big deal for me was go to a Big Ten school out of a segregated high school in Jacksonville. So I made the newspaper. I stood up at my high school commencement, first student in the history of the school since 1866 to go to a Big Ten school. And I was so unprepared for what that experience was. Riding the train, going up there, sitting next to a white man. Where you going? I'm on my way to Michigan State University. You going to school there? I'm going to school there. Basketball or football? Well, I had an academic scholarship. but these are the hidden things. When Malty was talking about his experience with the Dolphins, by this time my afro was down to my shoulders and I was negative about everything. But the fact is, he had to deal with situations involving coaches, coaching staff, team owner, that had to do with race. But at the same time, you got to, whatever the number of tackles, whatever the weight you press, whatever speed you run the 40, you still got to do that. But you have to do it in the context of standards that are set by somebody else. And you have to do it by the standards, so they say, Malty, about how many black wide receivers you can have on the field at the same time and who your running back is going to be. But what I'm saying is there's all of that that's so far beneath the surface that is unspoken. You cannot even share it. If you confront somebody, they'll deny it. So it's just you and coming up with a way to cope, even though you don't have a model. And that's a part of the value of the exploration that this book represents again. You find out it's just you. Just you and the Lord. That's what I used to say. Just me, Lord. Because that's where it comes from. Whatever that it is that allows you to cope, that allows you to still maintain another standard while you don't diminish your own self-esteem, is the gift that I think that all of these huddles can start to cultivate among us.
You touched on something that is real for an African American man. You know, it's tough being a man, period. But then there is even another aspect of the obstacle and challenge when you add the part of your being an African American man, where you're in a game that really you feel is rigged. It's a game that you're playing, and the rules and the scale is not balanced for you to win and be successful, yet the expectations are still there. Even though you may not have the same resources, even though you may not get the same opportunities, you still have to deal with those expectations. And that's real. That's still real today. But we have to, in spite of the fact that we live in, I believe, a country where it's a blessing. There's no place I'd rather live than the United States. But the reality is, America was not built, in my opinion, and set up for African American men or women to be successful in the game. But the expectations are still there. And in many cases, the expectations and the obstacles and the hurdles that we've had to jump over is even higher than our counterpart. Did you experience, I know you experienced that in...
Yes, at Moulton, it was all black school. At Bethune was all black. Then when I got in the NFL, it was the first time that I associated with whites. It was actually the first time. And it was a friend of mine, his name is Vernon J. We came to Dolphin at the same time. So he grew up in Iowa, so he came from a farm. And I grew up in Florida, and I did migrant farm work. And it was surprising, we both was trying to make the team, and we started talking, and I realized that it was the same. We both had the same goal and everything, and but only one thing that happened that was somewhat negative was that I was interviewed, one time, and I told him that Vern, it was kind of like a joke. I told him that Vern, I took my money from the Super Bowl and bought a house, and Vern took his money and bought the Bulls. So I jokingly, with the newsman, said that Vern took his money and bought a car. He said, I got a house. But I didn't realize Vern was starting a farm, so he needed a bull to breed the cows. So he ended up, now he has a big farm up there in Iowa. So I didn't have no clue what he was doing. And things just went on. Now, I want to give you a statement about the first time I bought my wife some flowers. Actually, somebody left some flowers. I brought them home as a joke. So here's some flowers. She said, oh, flowers. So she was so excited. Women get this crazy over flowers. Then I start buying flowers. Mm-hmm. And over my life, I developed a saying, in order to have a good relationship, I always say you got to have God, number one, communication, number two, trust, income. You see, God, communication, income, trust, respect, love, and empathy. If you have those working, you'll have a nice relationship. And I can almost guarantee if the communication and the income is slacking, you're going to have some problem.
It's interesting, your story about the flowers. So, again, my wife is Miss Why Don't You? That's her nickname. Why don't you do this and why didn't you do that there? And one evening, we were on our way to dinner and we got into the parking lot of the restaurant. I don't even remember what that particular why don't you moment was all about. But I remember she went into another why don't you question. And I just got so upset. And I said, I told you that's not me. Stop trying to make me be like someone else. And I got out of the car, slammed the door, walked inside the restaurant, sat down. She came in after me. It was one of those dinners where we ate, but there was no conversation. And then when we got home, she immediately went to the bedroom and she laid in the bed and she began to cry and she repeated these words over and over. I just want you to make me feel like I'm your queen. I just want you to make me feel like I'm your queen. And so, after an hour, I'm like, how long is this going to go on? I walked out of the room. I went and watched the movie in the family room. I came back in the bedroom. She was still crying and murmuring the same words. I just want you to make me feel like I'm your queen. And that was the moment where I asked myself for the first time, why can't I do this? Why don't I know how to do this? I just feel like she had these expectations for me as a husband, and I could not meet them. And that night was a changing point for me. I actually went into the other room and I sat on the bed. And that night I had a conversation with God. I said, God, why don't I know how to do these things? Help me. And the next week, I'm tying this into your flower story. The next week, I pull up into the parking lot at Nova University. I was working on my degree in psychology. And when I pulled up immediately, a florist van pulled up next to me. And the young lady was unloading all the flowers out of the van, and she had more flowers than she could carry. So I asked, I said, ma'am, did you need any help carrying those flowers? She says, yes, will you help me, please? And so I grabbed a couple of the flowers, and she grabbed the other two, and I carried them into, I'll never forget, the Mailman building on Nova Southeastern University building. I helped her carry those flowers into the building, and after I got in there and placed them on the reception desk, the lady looked at me and she asked me, are you married? I said, yes. She says, does your wife like flowers? I said, I don't really know. I haven't really never given her any. She said, well, this is what I do. Since you helped me, she said, for $12, I'll deliver flowers to your wife whenever you want me to. I say, for $12? And so I say, you have a deal. And I gave her $12 right there, and I told her where my wife worked. And that lady delivered those flowers to my wife. And when my wife, she delivered to my wife's job. When I came home, my wife had a smile on her face I had never seen before. She was just glowing, and I felt like God had answered my prayer. He helped me. That was like first base for me. Okay, and what gave me the push to try to respond to some of the why don't yous was the desire to experience that smile again. Yeah, it was that smile. That smile got me. I never thought flowers or make her respond that way, but God answered my prayer because But then that's when as I got deeper into the question, why don't I know how to do these things? I realized the answer was, I've never seen it. It was foreign to me. It's never been modeled to me. And then that's when the real journey began, to where I had to now try to elevate and reach these standards, and that's a journey. Let's talk about that journey. Once you know the standards and you have a desire to reach those standards, that's a journey itself.
And it happens inside of you. Whatever that it is, it happens, and it's always curious about what the trigger was. It's how time, place, and circumstances, the blessings align themselves to show you. And all you have to do is to be receptive to the sign of the signal. And again, that's the beauty of self-examination. One, for me, recognize my limitation, you know, and and to be honest about it, and then show me the way to remove this limitation. Then I had to leave it alone, and sometime later. See, my thing was, I love you. You know, I couldn't add abba, okay? I don't not love you. If I didn't love you, wouldn't I do this? But I couldn't say it because I never heard it at home, okay? And so, you know, and then again, among the tough crowd who never heard it at home, after a while, if you start talking love, then people are going to question your toughness.
And that's interesting. And again, that's why I love these conversations, because you discover that you're not by yourself. It's like a relief. It's a load taken off your shoulder. You know, something simple as saying "I love you." How challenging that can be when you've never heard it, or you've never seen or witnessed that there. You know, I never saw my daddy, never heard my dad say, "I love you" to my mom. Never saw that. And so that was something I also struggled with. Now, Monty, I said the manhood, the husband part was an area that I struggled with as a young man, meeting those expectations. George said it was the toughness, because again, he was tossed into an age group that was much older and mature for him. What was it for you? Was it that was your biggest obstacle to meet society expectation? Was it a husband? Was it being a father? Was it being a provider? What would you say would be?
Okay, you know, I'm trying to think. You know, I know there are times when I talk about sports, and but I had to learn how. I don't want to be too negative, but in Brooksville, with the migrant farm world, there are a lot of women you didn't have to be loving and sweet and kind, and I thought this was the way it was. Then, but I have a lot of friend women now, and they really educated me on, that was time when I would be speaking, have a speaking engagement. And I had a tendency of starting to talk without introducing my wife. And the ladies who were my friend, they would always attend, and they would call me and say, always introduce your wife first. And I learned, and I started to doing that. Then she seemed to be happy because the other ladies, we were friends, but she wanted to be the number one, the main one. And so, but that was, it was, but I had to learn everything about women. You know, this is a short story. It wasn't pressure on me, but, you know, I was at Bethune walking down the road with a young lady, and I didn't know the man's supposed to walk next to the road, and the woman walk inside. So I'm walking, and I talking, and I get on the inside. She'll stop. I mean, you know, I get on the inside, then she'll stop and put me back on the outside next to the road. And she did it 2 or 3 times. I said, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? See, the man's supposed to always walk next to the traffic to protect the woman. I said, oh, I was like, I didn't know that. And then I had one time when I went to a banquet, and if anybody was at Bethune in the 60s, food was like gold. And I invited a young lady to a banquet, and so when I came there, I noticed I was sitting down, and she was standing. So she looked at pull a chair out for me. So I pulled a chair out. She sat down, I put it back, and I sat down. I started eating. She said, no, don't do that. So I had to learn, do a little bit of small talk, and so a lot of my friend ladies, they educated me on what to do and what to say and what not to do. And that's basically how I learned. I learned it from other women.
And what's interesting is when we share and think about so many of the obstacles is it's not like they're asking us to build a rocket or anything, but even though they're small and seem and appear to be simple, when you've never seen it, when you've never had it modeled, when you've never done it, it seems so foreign to you. And though saying I love you or walking in the house and giving them a kiss or knowing where to stand when you're walking with a young lady, knowing, etiquette at dinner, when you don't know any of those things.
Food to eat.
Yeah, it's so much that we have to be, I don't know to say, can't even say retaught, but we have to learn as adults as the result of not having a male father in our life. I guess as the lady, the florist was an aid to me. God sent you some lady friends that say, "Hey, Monty, this how you do it. This is what you're supposed to do." Thank God for help. He sends us some human angels, and I hope our listeners are getting this here. It's not giant things when you think about it. It's a combination of so many small things that we haven't been taught, we haven't been exposed to, we have not experienced, that present challenges to us when it comes to us meeting society's expectation as a man, as a husband, as a father. Because here's reality that we've all learned. We live what we learn. And what we haven't learned, we can't live. For years I was angry with my father, and then I can't remember what year it was, but my brother went to Orlando for something, and while he was there, he spent some time with one of my uncles, one of my father's brothers, and he shared with my brother their childhood and how they grew up. And when my brother shared with me what my uncle shared with him, I realized that my daddy gave me what he was given. He couldn't give me any more. His daddy was a hard worker, yet his daddy, when things didn't go right, whooped everybody in the house just like my daddy did. Everybody got a whipping. The children got a whipping. Mama got a whipping. Everything, his daddy would, provide. But the other aspects of being taught how to treat a woman and all those things, my dad didn't have that. And when that was a revelation for me, and that helped me to release some anger that was in me for my daddy, because that moment after my brother shared what was shared with him, I said, you know what? I said it to my brother. I said, Dad gave us all that he had. He gave us what he had. That's all he had. Yeah. He couldn't give us any more. And that's when I realized I've got to start this journey. And it's a journey of me learning what is the true definition of being a man, not what society says. What is the true definition of being a husband and being a father? All of these different areas and dimensions of our life, we have to try to figure it out. And honestly, I don't know, y'all probably felt like I felt. you felt shameful that I'm 30 years old and I don't know how to I don't know how to do these things. This should be something that, you know, a 30-year-old man, and so it goes back to what Mims talks about. We suppress it and we deal with the pain and the shame and the guilt and whatever is happening internally in us in secrecy, and that's where we don't want to be. That's where we don't need to be. And that's when we end up unhealthy inside, unhealthy as men.
Because you cannot, again, relive or repeat the past. And one of the good things, again, about this reflection is to find some good. For example, I felt inadequate to protect my mother. I felt inadequate to assert myself in situations where there was some risk. Because for me, being a shorty but good, winning was not a reward. See, I scored a touchdown, and I got to live through getting my butt kicked by the opponent after the game. and that became a thing for me, and that was always a theme. You know, when I would go to the store, buy a pack of cigarettes for my mother, I had to give up the change to the boys that lived between me and the drugstore. Because we lived right next door to the lot where they hung out. And this is what I'm talking about. Oh, man, I would try to go around the block to keep from paying. Hey, man, let me help me with a beer. Mm-hmm. And this went on. But see, when I look back, at the same time, my mother was living alone in a pretty tough neighborhood right next door to the place where the thugs hung out. And I was on my way to college. And for 6 years, it was like I had been investing. Because when I came back from school, one of the boys said, boy, let me tell you something. Nobody will ever bother your mama. And so they operated like a security force. And a part of it was because they didn't have no axe to grind with me. And what I was saying, well, okay, so I wasn't giving up money against my will. I was investing in my security system when I was away and couldn't protect my home. But what happens is some good comes out of, if we allow it, good will come out of all of the misfortune that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. You know. I truly believe that. I truly believe that you just have to go back and look for the silver lining in the midst of the painful moments. But so often we're in such a rush to get as far away as we can from those painful moments. We don't engage in honest reflection to see what can we take from that is of value to help us for the journey ahead. You know, we've got about a minute. Any closing remarks? I'll give your closing remarks to our audience.
Well, this is a short story. Eb Davis, my friend, he has a son, Scotty Davis. He's about 6'4", 240, and Stevie around 6'2", about 220 or something like that. And I had a function at the juvenile center, and my job was to try to show the juveniles how to talk, how to be with people. So when Scotty came in, he was at the University of Florida. So Scotty always told me, yes, sir, and no, sir. And the juvenile said that if I was big as him, I would, he'd do whatever to me. And I said, no, it's not about being physical. It's about respect. Me and his father, we are friends, so he respect me. And Stevie did the same thing, and they did not understand while he was saying yes, sir, and no, sir to me.
I think I like those words. If more men respected each other, I think we will see less harm being committed towards each other. It is one of the most saddening things in America is to see how violent men, African American men, often behave towards other African American men. George, your closing remarks to the men, the brothers that's watching or review this.
Well, I'll just remind you of the song that Ali really made famous, and that is The Greatest Love. The greatest love. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all, and that goes for the individual, and that certainly goes for the brotherhood of black men.
Well, I thank both of you, Marty and George, for joining me for our first man-to-man huddle. My closing remarks to the men who are viewing and those who will view is, don't be afraid to have these conversations. I'm sure you have a man or a male figure in your life who you're comfortable with. We need to have these conversations with each other because too many men are suffering in silence, and that's not what we want. Our objective and our hope is that through these candid, open dialogues that we will have, it will help you, inspire you, and encourage you, and point you in a direction that will help you be a better man, a better husband, a better father. We have a lot of battles and secret wars, but we can win them. But you cannot defeat what you're unwilling to confront. So have the courage to confront that which troubles you internally. Talk about it. Get someone who you feel you can trust to have a conversation with and be open. And that's where the healing process begins. Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. Our man-to-man huddles again. Every first Monday of the month, we will engage in uncut, unchased dialogue about issues that we deal with men. And again, the goal is for you to be a better man, a better husband, a better father. God bless you. Godspeed. Until we see you again next month at Man to Man.